This is the Eye for an Eye channel. Welcome to today's show. I want to continue to cover the main story in the mainstream media about the situation going on in Maine with a guy who went into a couple of places and decided to throw his whole life away to take away the life of, or the lives of, supposedly people that he'd never met or knew, because, you know, that makes sense, having no motive and then doing something like that. But then, of course, he conveniently, like all the other people who are involved in these types of situations, has the same blueprint with leaving notes and being attached to the right wing, but we're not supposed to be suspicious about it. So I want to show you a couple of the stories that I showed over on the website here on YouTube. Obviously, I have to leave my logo on the screen. I can't show you the actual articles, but I'll tell you where you can find the articles by Googling the topics I'm about to tell you about, because it's very easy. It's very much out there now. They're talking about these things that were once considered taboo and conspiracy. So real quickly, before I get into that, I want you to know my backup channel. I have two now. Two, that's right. My new main backup channel, which is going to have content on it, whether it's old content and new content, is called United Uprising. It has been approved. It's finished. It's ready to go. So now please subscribe to that channel below. And I have a brand new one, a brand new one as of today. I just started. It is called A Call for Vengeance. And no, I am not calling on vengeance. I know vengeance is God's, but that's the name of the channel. Of course, it'll have its regular content on it in due time. But please make sure you sub to both those channels now. Do me that favor if you appreciate this content. I appreciate all of you, and I would appreciate it greatly if you subscribe now, pause the video, and did that for me. Now let's move to this story here, okay? So everybody's heard about everything that's going on up there, and well, guess what? Even the most dead asleep zombies are starting to see some very peculiar signs with everything going on. Why? Well, the mainstream media's narrative is that this guy, as of me recording this right now, is loose in the woods. He's on the run, and somehow he hasn't been caught yet after a few days. Hasn't been caught yet, right? And they're saying, well, he's got the skills to survive out there. But here's where people's brains should start functioning, okay? The mainstream media is reporting this event as very well planned by the guy who did it. So that's the excuse they're using as to why he hasn't been caught yet. Of course, he'll never be caught. There'll be some type of event out in the woods where he'll be executed, and we'll never actually see a trial or hear about a motive, because these are Manchurian candidates. And I'll get into that in a minute, because even Newsweek is talking about MKUltra. Yeah, you heard that correct. So the media is talking about how this was very well planned. So this is where you start to use your brain. You say, okay, it's very well planned. So if this guy wanted to get away with this so badly, right, that he had it very well planned, even though he supposedly left a note at his home that said he was going to end his life, I guess he had a change of plans, even though it's well planned. So then if it was well planned for him to escape, why would he want to end his life? On top of that, if your goal to do one of these events, which we know it's not really a goal, this is a government created event, if your goal is to escape and you want to get away with this crime, then why wouldn't you wear a mask? Okay, his face is all over the media. So you're telling me everything was so well planned that he just happened to go inside and not even put a mask on? I mean, he didn't even decide to put on his face diaper, on top of all things, which is really the biggest crime that was committed, right? Is the fact that he didn't put his face mask on, because he could have got somebody really sick, if you catch my drift, right? Right, because he didn't wear his face diaper. But really, let's be serious here. If somebody plans this event out, and this is really going on, and they're trying to get away with it, and you're telling us in the mainstream media that it was well planned, and he knows the woods really well, and he has hideouts all out there, et cetera, then why wouldn't he wear a mask? Why would he have his face plastered all over? He didn't think enough to wear a mask? Are you joking? I mean, even the dumbest of people would think of wearing a mask. I mean, we see criminals do this all the time, right? Going into banks, it's the oldest, thing in the book, right? Robbing a train back in the day, they would put bandanas over their face to hide their identity. But he decided not to hide his identity. On top of that, he left his car like literally right up the road, right? So they find his car. They're able to identify him through the through the camera footage. He wouldn't take his car with him and ditch it somewhere where they wouldn't find it. I mean, it's such a joke. It's always a joke, right? And that's why it's funny when they say the main mass, what do we want to call him? Manchurian candidate. That's what we'll call him. The main mass Manchurian candidate was probably pretty well planned out. Right? The man planned it out pretty well. Well, it was very well planned out by the CIA, of course, because that's who's behind all these events, and everybody could see it. So much so, like I covered over on the website Uprising Revival, where I put together some of these clips as well as some of our crisis actors who showed up on scene, as they always do. But this is so much well planned out by this guy and the CIA that the mainstream media, believe it or not, is actually reporting and trying to debunk right off the bat people like me and you. Why do you say? Well, listen to this mainstream story out of Newsweek. Yes, Newsweek, which is deemed a credible source. And even in the face of all the fake news of CNN and people catching on, you never hear Newsweek ever brought up, right? They're like, well, Newsweek's a credible source. Well, Newsweek's headline is what do we want to call him? Okay, the suspect in Maine, his background fuels conspiracy theories. You might say, oh, okay, whatever. They always do this, right? Because people are getting desensitized, not realizing that they're doing it every time because it's part of mind control. So this is how the story goes, right? News that a suspected shooter with a military background who remains at large in Maine has sparked wild theories that he was the subject of government testing or had taken certain type of psychotropic drugs. Robert Card of Bowdoin, to the east of Lewiston, has been identified as the person of interest, killing at least 22, or 18. The number seems to fluctuate pretty easily, which I mentioned over on the website. I mean, how do you not have an accurate number? You're supposed to be the news. How do you get the numbers wrong, right? I mean, isn't that as confirmed as it gets when you have an actual confirmation from a hospital of a number of bodies and they can't even get that straight? It just shows you that nobody pays attention, nobody cares. They just get all riled up and then they get herded into the politics of it all, which is exactly what this is by saying that this guy looks at right-wing things, and I'll get into that in a minute, on Twitter, etc., like I talked about on the website. So this is where it gets funny. Ready? The active shooter. Bulletin describes Card as a trained firearms instructor thought to be in the Army Reserve stationed out of Saco, who had recently reported mental health issues, including hearing voices. Again, that's how they tied this stuff into us. And then it goes on to say this. Card's military background has led some on social media to speculate without offering evidence. They put that right in the middle there. They put, his military background has led some on social media speculate without offering evidence, quote, because they have to beat that into your head a little more, that he was part of MKUltra, a CIA psychological experimentation program that ran from the 50s to the 70s and used various methods, including giving psychoactive drugs to unwitting subjects. What? Okay, wait. So when you're admitting to this now, which is one of the things I try to get through people's heads, right? Because when they hear MKUltra, people just haywire and they're like, oh, that's a conspiracy, right? It's not a conspiracy. The government is admitted to doing it. I've shown you clips of even Clinton openly talking about doing it. Okay? It shows you how dumb people are, because even then when people were talking about the government doing these experiments on people, people were calling them conspiracy theorists. Then the government came out and admitted that they were doing this. They admitted that they were doing experiments on people's minds, and this goes back to Operation Paperclip, which I've covered a dozen times. Right? They've admitted to doing it. And then still, when stories like this come out, people still go, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. It shows you how dumb they are. So the government admits to having the ability to do it. Why would they do it? Why would they do it then? Oh, well, they were just doing it for fun? Was this just a hobby they had? Or were they creating Manchurian candidates? Now, the reason that they make this glorified in movies like the Bourne Identities and the Manchurian Candidate movies is, of course, to desensitize people, and anything they see on the movie screen they don't think is actually occurring, and then everything on the news they think is real. And in reality, it's the flip. They show you, obviously, the characters and stuff and the actors. It's a fictional type of story, but really based on true stories for the most part, because all the stuff that they do with technology, with MKUltra, et cetera, and they show you in the movies is true. And they create these Manchurian candidates, but people are like, it's just like the Bourne Identity movies. That's not real. But really, every single thing you see on the news is completely staged, completely fabricated, and completely fake. And people get all upset about it. They're like, you can't call these events not real. You're hurting family members' feelings, et cetera, which is exactly what they did with Alex Jones, which was all done by design, just like they're doing with the other guy from InfoWars, throwing him in jail because he showed up at the riots that were created by our government. These are all intimidation things that they do to make sure you don't talk about these things, you don't question these things, or that's what's going to happen to you. When in reality, like I said, when it happened, all Jones would have had to do is say, look, I didn't believe what I saw in the news. Why don't you prove it to me? Why don't you show me the bodies? Why don't you show me this or show me that? No, instead just said, I made it all up because I wanted to get views or whatever, right? That's how this works. They're using these things as intimidation tactics so that people don't talk about them. So, back to the story here. We have number one, how incredible it is that Newsweek is even reporting on MK Ultra and reporting on this theory, because there are people out there who are suspicious about it, but they know clearly, and I said this too on the website, as much as we think we understand psychologically looking at all this stuff because we're all awake, they know how the brain functions more than anyone else. I mean, they literally were cutting people's heads open. You know, some of the stuff in Operation Paperclip, they were literally like sewing human beings together. So it's like stuff you'd see in Human Centipede, okay? They were like poking people's brains with sticks, with electromagnetic frequencies, all this stuff, right? And a lot of it we see now in today's society with 5G, et cetera. But they were doing all of this stuff to figure out every single thing that the brain does. So they know better than us. So when we see a story like this, you know, naturally we're going to laugh and be like, can you believe they're even bringing this up? But they know, as much as we say, well, this should wake people up, them mentioning MK Ultra in the news, they know by doing this that it does create another wall in people's minds. Because anytime the word conspiracy theory is in any article, people dismiss it as truth. They just go, okay, oh, those crazy tinfoil, all these things, right? And there's nothing, you know, a lot of these theories, even like tinfoil hat wear, there's nothing could be more true and needed in society, right? Like tinfoil hats, you know, back then it wasn't, the electromagnetic frequencies, et cetera, aren't what they are now with 5G. And they still use that as an excuse, and nobody thinks to even ask a question of what that theory was about. So they know that even by bringing attention to it, it creates a mechanism in the mind and a wall in the mind. And that's why they do it. They don't care if it seems obvious. And they put these stories out, what? Within 24 hours. So while this is going on, we're supposed to believe all this stuff has happened that they're telling us has happened in Maine. While this guy's on the loose, and conveniently everybody's told to shelter in place. Does that narrative sound familiar? Shelter in place, lock yourself in your home, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, it sounds real familiar, right? You see how constant this is with sheltering in place? Because they're desensitizing you because the carbon footprint is sheltering in place. Okay, all this stuff with the climate is going to keep you locked and imprisoned in your home, like I said, for years and years and years. So, I'm just, oh my gosh. So, in 24 hours after the story, instead of talking about where it could be, everyone's locked up, this is this and this and that, and blah, 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 blah. What's the story that's out there? They're already deflecting on stories about MK Ultra because of his military background, because of the lack of motive. Right? And then, right? So, I mean, immediately, like this isn't something like weeks after the event. The first thing they're doing is coming out in Newsweek and blasting the theory of MK Ultra, et cetera, because they want people to have this mechanism in their brain to not think of that this event is suspicious, that the fact that the guy had planned this so well but didn't wear a mask, all these things that are just common sense things, they need to put this wall and this mechanism in almost instantaneously, right? Then it goes on to say, in this article, there is a pattern of these targeted individuals saying that somehow the government is complicit in their state of mind before they completely lose it to either end themselves or seek retribution or both. That's not really how this works, right? But they go on to say they added that the main suspect is former military, heard voices. They are known for experimenting on soldiers. Could he be another Manchurian candidate that woke up? I mean, this is a Newsweek, right? So the MK Ultra program makes an appearance in various conspiracy theories about high-profile assassinations and illicit government activity, according to the academic text Conspiracy Theories in American History and Encyclopedia. However, the CIA program was shut down in 1973, a decade before Card was born in 1983. And then this is the mechanism they use, and it seems to work. They tell these idiots out there that they stop doing it, right? It's like a mass murderer gets caught. Like, imagine Jeffrey Dahmer got caught, even though he's, connected to the CIA. Imagine that he got caught. And they said, you know what? And he's like, I'm going to stop. I stopped doing it. And then we just let him off the hook, or Ted Bundy, and they just go, all right, he said he's going to stop. He stopped. So why would we trust these people who are doing something so disturbing, and for what purpose they don't tell you, experimenting on the mind with the MK Ultra, right? Then they go, well, we're done. We won't do it anymore. Well, first of all, what were you doing it for in the first place? Oh, for fun? Was this a hobby that your so-called scientists were doing? Oh, we were doing it for the human benefits, right? To find out about modern medicine. Those are the types of things they always throw at us. They never give us a reason why they do it. And then we're supposed to believe, on top of, think about how psychotic that is to do this stuff on human beings, other human beings, to experiment on them like they're guinea pigs, right? So that you could relate to that psychologically of thinking of a serial killer. And then we go, all right, they said they're not going to do it anymore. Let's let Dahmer walk, or let's let Bundy walk, or let's let Gacy walk, right? So we're letting them walk, and then we're letting them just wipe their hands clean of it without explaining what this was about, right? And then we're supposed to take them at their word that they did all this experimentation for 20 years. And then they're just like, oh, okay, we won't do that anymore. Let's move on to something else. Your tax money's funding this. And whatever, obviously they, they don't give you results. Well, this is what we did it for with your tax money, and this is the result, and blah, 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 blah. No, nothing. They just go, we're not doing it anymore because we got caught. Okay, we'll move on. We'll send our psychopaths somewhere else, like maybe creating a fake virus so they can get something in your body. I'm just kidding. Think about that, right? Think about that. And what's the other things that we hear? That method of mind control works, right? Where they say they stopped doing it. So then these idiots repeat it. They go, they stopped doing the MK Ultra stuff. Instead of just going, why were they doing it in the first place, right? And they go, oh, it's for military training? Okay. We hear that also with the Illuminati, right? Whenever that comes up, which they've turned into a term that people just laugh and dismiss now, but whenever that comes up about the actual origins, the truth of it, they go, they disbanded. According to whom? According to Wikipedia? According to these untrustworthy news sources? They claim that it disbanded because you're going to believe it because of them. So they're admitting to it. Then what they do? They just all of a sudden decide, all right, well, we'll quit. I mean, are you joking me? They've changed the names, like the OSS changed to the CIA. I mean, that's all they do. They don't go anywhere, right? But these people are just too dumb, and that mind control clearly works. They just go, they stopped doing it. You don't want any answers as to what they were doing, et cetera, et cetera. It's insanity. It really is. And then, of course, remember the mental health stuff they tie into this, hearing voices. This is all precursors for Christians, okay? Because this is one of the narratives we've heard, on mainstream news and in mainstream TV shows like The View, et cetera, is that, they think they're hearing God. That's, we've heard that. I've covered that in videos of The View specifically, where they're talking about, somebody, they're like, well, it's one thing to believe in God. It's another thing to hear God. That might be a mental health issue, right? So this is all tying into and linking to Christians eventually. And that's why I'm warning everybody about what's going on over in the, let's just call it the Middle East today, okay? That's why. This is all going to lead to Christians. Oh, mental health, they're hearing voices, they believe in conspiracy theories, lump them into this, and then we can just go and unarm them, because that's what people are asking for, okay? So, unfortunately, I can't show you a lot of this stuff on screen, but here's just even a quote that I read from underneath one of the articles. Okay, quote, the laws were in place to intervene but ignored. He told people he was hearing voices and was committed for mental evaluation for 2 weeks in 2023. How does someone like that get to keep firearms and remain a firearms instructor? The signs were there. Someone dropped the ball. So this is how they want people to think, right? By them telling you this stuff, but somehow we still got to come. Where do you think this is headed towards? And these people don't realize that what's really going on is the government's creating these events because they want to unarm civilians, because at the end of the day, no matter how advanced the technology is that the military has and the government has over all of us, we have numbers. And in any war, numbers is what matters most. Now, if we're all unarmed, then numbers mean nothing. But if everybody out there has this specific weapon that they're targeting, because every story is this specific weapon, because they want that specific weapon, because if millions of people have it, then their military isn't as powerful against people who could pierce armor with certain types of bullets, et cetera, et cetera. That's what you need to realize. We still have numbers. They still fear us. Otherwise, they wouldn't even be creating the PSYOPs. Why would they create these events? Unless there was one thing they need to get finished off, which is unarming the civilians. And specifically, why do you think the narrative of all these is about conspiracy theorists? Because they're the ones, it's crazy to say the term conspiracy theorists, they're the ones who would be the front line against them. It's really people who are awake would be the front line against them, and that's who they fear. So obviously, with those stories, which I showed in the video on the website Uprising Revival, is that all the stuff that comes out after it, just like 1984, all the dorks on the internet immediately try to tie this into right-wing theory, because that's what they've been trained to do through the mind control. So they start going, look at the stuff he liked on Twitter. Look at some of the stuff he looked up. Look who he listened to. I bet he listened to a call for somebody. And they go on and on and on with that stuff, right? Then you see he liked this stuff. Oh, he was anti-trans. Oh, and they put a blueprint in place for people that they want to unarm, and that's me and you. This is how it all works. It's very simple. It's very simple. It doesn't take out-of-the-box thinking to have common sense here. So when you hear stories like this, you should do the exact opposite. When they're telling you they want to take something from you, or they don't want civilians to have something, make sure you have it. Okay? Those are the things you need to keep in mind. Because just like when they were telling us a few years ago that, they were going to give it to us for free and we all needed to have it, you knew better. And you said, I'm not taking that. I don't trust these people. Well, in this situation, whatever your take is right now on anything going on, when someone's at your front door, you might think a little bit differently. So I would think about protecting your home, yourself, and potentially, this is going to be a type of cause that people are going to have to lay their lives down for. Throughout history, people have laid their lives down for causes very similar to this. But they don't want you to think like that because they want you to think everything's safe. And it's crazy to even have this notion that something could go wrong. And guess what? Guess what? When it happens in the blink of an eye and we're all right about it, people still won't be like, oh, those guys were right. We should have listened to them. They'll still question us and they'll still be like, no, you were wrong. And what you're saying isn't true. And it's Putin and it's this, just like they did with the outbreak, because none of these people can think. And then when they do think, they have narcissism embedded in them. So they don't want to admit that they were wrong and you were right, when it's really just about survival at this point. So back to the story. Okay, and I'll wrap it up. Everybody out there needs to keep an eye on all these narratives, right? Manifestos, links to alt-right, links to even, I wouldn't be surprised if they put something in, some of your favorite YouTube channels. Listen to this person, listen to that person, right? It brings about more censorship. It's guilt by association, now they're trying to do guilt by like what your politics are. And the libs love this because they're all just a bunch of dorks and they don't realize that they're going to turn on them at some point soon. And that's perfectly fine, really, because, a lot of us are not going to be enslaved by these people. So, they have free will. God gave them a free will. These people can wake up and they can go, okay, being a libtard is not a good thing. And being a conservative is not either. We should all just band together as civilians. And if they don't, well, screw them. Whatever happens to them, happens to them. It's God's will, and they have free will to wake up to this stuff, and they refuse to because they're narcissistic and they think they have a clue, and they don't have the slightest clue. These are the types of people you could walk over in life, right? You ever see somebody, you're like, oh man, that girl walks all over him, or vice versa. That guy walks all over. Well, all these people who are libs, they're those types of people, okay? People walk all over them. And eventually the government is going to walk all over them. And so are the righteous, because we're not going to have time to deal with if men could have babies and this type of stuff when what comes here is coming, and it is coming. So this story out of Maine, those are the talking points, right? MK Ultra brought into the forefront. The guy likes alt-right stuff. Oh my goodness, I can't see where this is possibly going. And guess what? Let me guess. They're going to find him and apprehend him in the woods, and he's not going to be alive. Oh my goodness. Of course he won't, because they never are. I thank everyone. Well, I shouldn't guarantee that, but 99% of the time, they don't make it. I think the only one I can remember off the top of my head, I mean, we can go back to Lee Harvey Oswald. I know the other Kennedy one, survived. And I know that the guy in Colorado with the Joker thing, the crazy hair, he did supposedly. And maybe even in Parkland. But I mean, those are a lot of events that aren't even real, obviously. So those people's brains are fried already from all the mind control experiments done on them. So they send the Manchurian candidate out, or they just grab an actor, but they fried their brains ahead of time. So these people have no motives. They look like complete psychopaths. And you look at him and you go, oh, that guy's lost. There's nothing in his eyes. Yeah, that's because the government fried his brain. And it's very possible. You know how we know? Well, just read the Newsweek article. They talk about all the experiments they did on humans' brains, right? But that's real ethical for the government to do. We could trust them, right? Yeah, okay. I thank everyone for being here. Please do me a favor. And please subscribe to the two channels below. Okay, United Uprising and a call for vengeance. And I am not calling on vengeance again. I know vengeance is God's, but it's a name I just felt like using. So please do that for me. Do me that favor and subscribe to those channels now as we continue to fight all of this stuff that they don't want you to know about, because they don't want you to critically think. And that's something that they have the ability to make people do or help people do, is snap out of it. So it's time for people to snap out of it. And hopefully it's time for people to sub to those backup channels. Hope to see you on the website as well, uprisingrevival.com. You're missing out if you're not there. You're missing out on a lot of great stuff. So check it out if you haven't. Thanks again, everybody. God bless all of you as always and your families.